Hello my friends and welcome to yet another Red Gamer Tech video, myself and Marta, where as always I'm here with the latest and greatest from the tech world in the last 24 or so hours. We're going to kick things off this fine afternoon with a little something from AMD. As essentially what we have here is that AMD has won back ownership of 3 graphics patents that were previously struck down on a complaint by LG Electronics. Essentially, AMD appealed the decision of the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, or the PTAB, which basically dismissed the ownership of the patents on the grounds that the IP claimed was, quote, too obvious in light of prior art. And now this decision has been overruled by a US Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. And in case you're wondering, the 3 patents in question relate to unified shaders. And basically, the 3 judges on the US Court of Appeals Federal Circuit ruled unanimously that AMD had, quote, conceived their inventions before the prior art. Basically, they were saying that AMD conceived of these ideas prior to the art that kind of threw this all into contention in the first place. Now, there is a pretty interesting write-up by IPWatchdog.com, but you can also read the full lawsuit if perhaps you're in for some long and admittedly dry reading. There is a link to Bloomberg, law.com, where you can read the full complaint and the result from the US Appeals Court. So it is all there for your perusal if you wish to know the ins and outs as to why the decision was made to overrule the PTAB's ruling. Now, the next item I have on our itinerary is rather interesting and is basically a look at the global PC market. And unfortunately, at least according to the research firms Gartner and IDC, the PC market is still in decline. Now, just to be clear, these are 2 separate companies, but their findings were pretty much identical. There were some differences, but they do paint a very, very similar picture. According to IDC, the global shipments for the PC market declined about 3%, and Gartner's numbers were a little worse. They put shipments down by about 4.6% year over year, but they did put the total tally for the Q1 2019 roughly in the same estimate figure, with Gartner estimating 58.5 million PC shipments made in the quarter. Now, they actually produced a sort of helpful table of like the top 6 in sales and the PC sort of vendor market as it were. And out of those top 6, which were Lenovo, HP, Dell, Apple, Asus, Acer, and others, only the top 3 saw gains in PC shipments, but these were smaller than the losses of their competitors. The rest of the market was down about 20.9%, and as you can see on the link in the description below this video, which is from VentureBeat.com, Lenovo and HP were fighting for the throne of the top spot of the shipments table. And if you cast your eyes down to Acer, for example, you'll see that they did not do well at all. They shrank about 13%, regardless of whose data you actually end up looking. And obviously, when you're talking about something as large, as complex as an entire market, especially with something like PC gaming, PC shipments, which obviously have a lot of, components within it, one of the things that are definitely attributed to this decline was the now infamous Intel CPU shortage. I do have a bit of a statement here from a senior analyst at Gartner, who says, quote, the supply constraints affected the vendor competitive landscape as leading vendors had better allocation of chips and also began sourcing alternate CPUs from AMD. The top 3 vendors worldwide were still able to increase shipments despite the supply constraint by focusing on their high-end products and taking share from small vendors that struggled to secure CPUs. So obviously we're not just blaming Intel. That would be a little silly, but it obviously is going to be a big factor into why we saw this decline. They are Intel. That's basically what it is. They are one of the biggest figures, if not the biggest, in PC gaming. So we have seen the impact of their issues on not only other people's results like MSI and obviously Acer and all that sort of stuff, but obviously we have seen it in a good way for AMD, where they have definitely capitalized on the shortages that Intel have been suffering from. Now, undoubtedly, the Chinese tariffs being put into place had a big factor as well here, but obviously it's not going to be pinned on any one thing. It's going to be numerous factors, all sort of at war with each other, as it were. But in the description below this video, you will find the VentureBeat article where I saw these figures, but you'll also find links to the Gartner and IDC results, so you can see their full reports there for you directly. There's quite a bit on both of them. They are very, very in-depth reports, as you might expect. But one last thing I do actually want to focus on here before I move on to our next topic is the sort of regional overview that Gartner did, basically saying that in the US we saw shipments about 11 million units in the first quarter of 2019, and this was a 6.3% decrease. And interestingly, Japan was the only region to experience shipment growth in the first quarter of 2019 with a 6.8% increase. And this was driven by a surge in business PC shipments. But unfortunately, elsewhere we did see the largest decline for Latin America in the quarter with a 16.6% decrease in PC shipments. This was due to some political stuff, as well as, of course, the CPU supply constraints, which again I have touched on quite a few times now. So, not a brilliant start for the global PC shipments market in the first quarter of this year, but of course we do still have the remainder of the year to come. We obviously have numerous big movements happening from all three parties in this space. So it's going to be interesting to see the Q2 and more likely the Q3 reports to see if we see the PC market bounce back at all from these issues. Obviously, as we finally move away from 14nm to 10nm from Intel, and obviously we've seen the release of Ryzen 3000, obviously the 7nm ones, we might see this decline sort of reverse itself a little bit, but it might take some time for that to happen. So definitely one to watch for sure. But speaking of Intel, they have actually gobbled up yet more of AMD's talent. We have seen them just take on talent from all over the place, but obviously they have taken on quite a few key people from AMD specifically, and they are not done. And again, this is something to do with graphics. They are really, really pushing to bulk up their graphics team for the Intel Xe launch. This time, we have Heather Lennon being taken on under Intel's wing, and they have served as manager for AMD RTG marketing and communications, and she was with AMD for 10 years, and she was responsible for the Radeon social media website, community engagement, and all that sort of stuff. And now she's going to be manager for digital marketing and graphics for Intel, and she's actually going to be working with someone who used to work over at Nvidia, Mark Taylor, who is now heading up the graphics division. So obviously she is in a different field from most of the people that Intel have sort of taken from AMD, but she has still many, many years of experience working for Radeon. It's never good to lose someone like that to your literal direct competitor. But well done to Heather. She seems very excited from her tweet to be working for Intel, and I can't really blame her. But it is definitely interesting to see that Intel are just on an absolute tear, just getting all the talent they absolutely can for their graphics division. Even when it comes to the sort of other side of things, the PR side of things, they are obviously very keen to get people with that industry knowledge, and well, that's exactly what they should be doing, in all honesty. So we're going to finish things up with a little bit of a gaming section here. But it does kind of tie into the comments that Paul made yesterday regarding the PlayStation 5. Now, just to kind of go a bit of TLDR, I would recommend watching Paul's video yesterday if you haven't seen it, because he does go into quite a bit of detail about this. But essentially, there was a paste bin which surfaced, which had the alleged specs, or some of the alleged specs, should I say, of the PlayStation 5. But we also had some games being mentioned. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because one of them was Horizon Zero Dawn 2. And now we have a tease about the sequel for Horizon Zero Dawn 2 from a voice actor. Now, she actually voiced one of the characters in the DLC, The Frozen Wilds, a lady by the name of, if I could speak, that would be wonderful, by the name of Janina. And basically she said at the Star Wars celebration, quote, "It's incredible, wait till you see the sequel, you're gonna die. I know some secrets, you're gonna die." So basically, I'm not saying this means that the leaks Paul discussed yesterday are 110% true. That would obviously be a bit silly, but it definitely lends them some credence. And also, we have a report having surfaced that a sequel to the highly successful God of War is actually on the way. Now, for those of you who've played God of War to the end, you'll know that it ends definitely on a point where there's more of the story to tell. I'm not going to say any more than that for anyone who hasn't played it. But if you haven't played it, what are you doing? Go and play it. It was my game of the year for that year. I know I never got around to doing a video on my game of the year, but that's my game of the year, okay? God of War. Anyway, so in all seriousness, I would definitely be down for a God of War sequel. If it's as good as the reboot or whatever you want to call it, absolutely sign me up. Of course, this is just a rumour, a report, but this does come from Kotaku's Jason Schreier, who has a bit of a reputation for being right about this sort of stuff. As you may recall, he was right about Black Flag and a few other games as well, so that doesn't mean it's true. Anyone can hear incorrect information, out-of-date information, or just misunderstand something or whatever, but regardless, it definitely lends some credence to it, and I'm definitely excited for the possibilities of yet another God of War. Would not say no, let's just leave it at that. Anyway, that is me done for this video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, the support is highly appreciated, and I'll see you next time.